My cop dad said I was too mentally unstable for visitors after I got pregnant by my brother. When I asked why he wouldn't protect me, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "The system protects its own." I stayed silent. That was 5 years ago. Today, he was crying in handcuffs while the judge read my victim statement. What was the worst betrayal of our life? When I was 14, my brother Wyatt assaulted me, and when I told my parents, my mom's first words were, "Think about his swimming scholarship." It happened during Wyatt's senior year. I had mono and had been spending most of my time in bed, too weak to even stand up. Then Wyatt came to my room around midnight. He told me he needed practice for the girls at college, and I'd become such a woman since he'd left. I was so feverish and confused that it wasn't until too late that I realized what was happening. When it was over, Wyatt smoothed my hair and whispered, "No one will ever believe you." I sat in my shower until the water ran cold, then stumbled straight to my parents' room and woke them up and told them everything. For a moment, I thought they'd protect me. Then Mom grabbed my shoulders and said, "I better not mess up his scholarship." Dad added that Wyatt was their retirement plan, that Olympic swimmers could make millions. They made me describe exactly what happened 3 times, looking for holes in my story. Dad said, "If it was that bad, why didn't you stop him? Maybe you wanted it to happen," while Mom cried about how I was going to destroy our family. Dad reminded me that Wyatt paid for my dance classes with his competition winnings. By sunrise, they'd convinced themselves it was a misunderstanding. They made me promise to never mention it again, especially not with college scouts coming around. But I've never really been the quiet type. I was going to find a way to expose Wyatt no matter what my parents said. The problem was Dad was a cop, 20 years on the force with friends throughout the system. Every officer in town knew him. When I tried reporting it at school, the resource officer called my dad directly. "Your girl's telling stories again," he said, like they'd discussed me before. That night, Dad sat me down and explained how things worked. His buddies would always call him first. Any report I made would come straight back to him. "The system protects its own," he said calmly. I had to get creative. I wrote about it in my English journal. The one teachers promised was confidential. My teacher read it, called my parents for a conference, and they convinced her I was writing fiction for attention. That night, they took my bedroom door off its hinges. "Privacy is earned with trust," Mom explained. Wyatt smirked from the hallway. I put all my energy into trying to destroy him so that I didn't have time to get in my feelings about living in the same house as my rapist. My next idea was the school counselor, but my parents started volunteering at my school and intercepted every attempt. They'd crash my sessions with concerned smiles, explaining their daughter's tendency toward elaborate stories. The counselor started seeing me as a creative writing prodigy instead of an abuse victim. My parents praised my imagination publicly, while privately taking away my laptop, my phone, anything I could use to communicate. So, fine. If they were going to call me a creative genius, I'd be a creative genius. During Wyatt's swim meets, I was still forced to attend. I started holding up signs that looked supportive but spelled out "help me" with the first letters. I taught myself Morse code and tapped SOS during extended family dinners. But people saw what my parents wanted them to see. A quirky teenage girl supporting her champion brother and saddled with an active imagination. Each failed attempt made them tighten control. They pulled me from dance, saying I needed to focus on supporting Wyatt's career. They pulled me out of school and homeschooled me to limit outside contact. They told my friends to give me some space so I could focus on my studies and intercepted all my calls. I convinced them to let my best friend come over for my birthday, and they agreed as long as I was supervised the whole time. So before she arrived, I wrote the truth on an index card and slipped it onto my bookshelf, hoping she'd notice. But Wyatt saw it first and ripped it up right in front of me moments before Natalie arrived. Then he sat there smirking at me the whole time she was there. After Natalie left, my parents were devastated by my betrayal. They told everyone I was too mentally unstable for visitors. Mom explained they'd caught me writing disturbing fiction about family members. Now any future accusations would look like mental illness. Then came the morning I woke up vomiting. Mom bought pregnancy tests, her face already calculating damage control. When they came back positive, she didn't ask if I was okay. She just called Dad and said, "We have a situation." Hours later, all 3 came in together and Dad told me their plan. They'd tell everyone I'd gotten pregnant by some boy from dance class. I'd be sent to boarding school, but really kept at home until I delivered. Wyatt's reputation would stay intact. Wyatt knelt beside me, touching my stomach. Besides, now you'll never get away from me. We're connected forever. That's when I finally broke. All the fight drained out of me as I looked at my cop father who'd blocked every escape route, my mother who'd chosen her son over me, and my brother whose baby was growing inside me. I'd tried everything, fought so hard to expose him, and all it had gotten me was pregnant and trapped in a house with my abuser. The tears came then, months of suppressed terror pouring out while they watched. I wasn't the funny sister anymore, wasn't the creative genius finding ways to ask for help. I was just 15, pregnant, and completely defeated. They'd won, and we all knew it. I spent the next few days in a fog. Mom brought meals to my room on a tray, watching me eat every bite. She'd sit on the edge of my bed, smoothing my hair like she used to when I was little, but her touch felt cold now. Dad installed a baby monitor in my room, the kind that streamed video to their phones. For my safety, they said. Wyatt started spending more time at home. He'd lean against my door frame, that same smirk playing on his lips. Sometimes he'd bring baby name books, leaving them on my nightstand with certain pages marked, always names that started with W, his way of marking his territory. The homeschooling became more intense. Mom set up a rigid schedule, every minute accounted for. Math at 9, science at 10:30, lunch at noon sharp. She'd hover over my shoulder, correcting my posture, monitoring my bathroom breaks. The windows in my room got new locks, the kind that needed a key from both sides. I tried to comply at first, too exhausted to fight. The morning sickness hit hard, leaving me weak and shaky. Mom would hold my hair back while I threw up, then immediately return to discussing lesson plans, like my body rebelling was just another inconvenience to schedule around. Dad started working different shifts, ensuring someone was always home. When he was on duty, Mom watched me. When she had errands, he'd take over. They tag-teamed my captivity with military precision. Even their arguments became strategic, conducted in hushed tones behind closed doors so I couldn't use their discord against them. The isolation was suffocating. My phone had been gone for weeks, my laptop locked in Dad's gun safe. The house phone had a new lock on it, requiring a code I didn't know. Even the mail got intercepted. Dad's police training making him paranoid about any outside communication. I started noticing things though, little cracks in their perfect system. Mom's hands shook when she gave me prenatal vitamins. Dad drank more at dinner, his words getting sloppier with each beer. And Wyatt, for all his confidence, started looking over his shoulder more often. One afternoon during biology, I asked Mom about genetic inheritance. Just casual questions about eye color, blood types. She answered mechanically, not catching on until I asked about genetic testing. Her face went white. She slammed the textbook shut and left the room. That night, they moved all the science books to their their bedroom. The days blurred together. Wake up, throw up, pretend to study, eat under supervision, sleep under surveillance. My body changed in ways that made everything real. Clothes got tighter. My reflection became a stranger. And through it all, Wyatt watched with proprietary interest, like I was his personal science experiment. I started small acts of rebellion. Nothing they could punish, just tiny assertions of self. I'd move my furniture an inch each day, creating a slowly evolving room they couldn't quite place as different. I'd hum during meals, nonsense tunes that made Mom's eye twitch. During lessons, I'd write my answers in increasingly tiny handwriting, forcing her to squint and lean closer. These weren't escape attempts. They were survival tactics. Proof to myself that I still existed beyond their control, that somewhere under the defeated exterior, I was still me. The doctor visits were the worst. Mom had found someone discreet, a family friend who did house calls. He'd examined me in my room while Mom stood guard, never asking the questions a doctor should ask a pregnant 15-year-old. His silence was bought and paid for, another cog in their machine. During one visit, I tried catching his eye, willing him to see the truth, but he just patted my hand and told Mom everything looked normal, like any of this was normal. After he left, I heard him and Dad talking about his son's upcoming police academy application. Another favor traded, another escape route blocked. Wyatt got bolder as my pregnancy progressed. He'd rest his hand on my stomach during family dinners, claiming he was just excited to be an uncle. Mom would beam at his maturity, while Dad nodded approvingly. They'd crafted a narrative where Wyatt was the supportive brother, stepping up during my mistake. The boarding school story evolved with each telling. Mom practiced it on the phone with relatives, adding details about my rebellious phase and the bad influence of that dance crowd. There's something deeply calculated about how the parents immediately shifted into damage control mode when she told them, like they'd already considered this possibility. The way Mom instantly mentioned the scholarship and Dad brought up retirement plans makes me wonder if they'd noticed warning signs before, but chose to ignore them for their own benefit. She'd cry on cue, the concerned mother dealing with a wayward daughter. Dad would take over when she got too emotional, his cop authority making the lies sound like facts. I learned things about my family I'd never wanted to know, how easily they lied, how quickly they closed ranks, how little I'd mattered when weighed against Wyatt's future. Every day brought new revelations about the people I thought loved me. One evening, while Mom prepared dinner, I found myself alone in the living room. The family photos on the mantle seemed to mock me. Wyatt's swim trophies gleamed like golden lies. I picked up one of his medals, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to trade a daughter for. Dad caught me holding it. Instead of anger, he looked tired. He sat beside me on the couch, the closest we'd been in weeks without an agenda. For a moment, I thought he might crack, might remember he was supposed to protect me. Then he took the medal, polished it with his sleeve, and put it back. Your brother works hard for these, he said. That was all. The house became a stage where we all performed our roles. The concerned parents, the supportive brother, the troubled daughter. Even alone, I felt like I was being watched, judged, measured against the story they'd created. Sometimes I'd catch myself almost believing it, wondering if maybe I had misunderstood that night. Then I'd remember Wyatt's weight, his whispered threat, and the truth would crash back. Mom started buying baby things, hiding them in the guest room closet. Neutral colors, no names on anything. Preparing for a child that would exist, but never belong to me. She'd already contacted adoption agencies, private ones that didn't ask questions if the money was right. My baby would disappear like it never existed. Another secret buried under their perfect family image. I tried to feel something for the life growing inside me, tried to separate it from how it got there, but every movement reminded me of that night, of Wyatt's hands, of my parents choosing him. The baby felt like another chain, binding me to this house, this family, this lie. 3 months in, something shifted. Not in them, but in me. The defeat that had crushed me started transforming into something else. Not hope exactly, but a cold determination. They thought they'd won, thought I'd given up. They got comfortable, lazy in their vigilance. I started paying attention to their routines, really watching. Mom always showered at 7:30. Dad did his weapon maintenance on Sundays. Wyatt had swim practice every evening, recruitment calls twice a week. The house had rhythms, patterns, and patterns could be exploited. My compliance made them relax. I took my vitamins without complaint, attended my lessons with fake enthusiasm, even started knitting baby booties under Mom's supervision. She was so pleased with my acceptance that she started leaving me alone for longer periods. Still locked in, still monitored, but not constantly watched. I used those moments to explore my boundaries, testing windows, checking doors, mapping the house like a prisoner planning escape. Not to run, not yet, just to know. Information was the only power I had left, and I hoarded it like treasure. The baby monitor in my room became my first small victory. I'd noticed it had a blind spot near the closet, a tiny sliver of space where I could exist unseen. I started spending time there, just sitting, being unobserved. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Wyatt noticed my compliance too. He got cockier, started pushing boundaries, sitting too close during meals, rushing against me in hallways, whispering comments about our baby when parents weren't listening. Each violation filed away in my memory, evidence for a trial that might never come. One night I heard them arguing, real arguing, not their strategic whispers. Mom's voice cracked with strain, Dad's boomed with frustration. Wyatt had failed a substance test at a swim meet. Nothing serious, just marijuana, but enough to threaten his scholarship. The golden boy had tarnished himself. The next morning, the dynamic had shifted. Wyatt sulked at breakfast while Dad lectured about responsibility. Mom fussed over him, trying to smooth things over, but the cracks were showing. Their perfect son had proved fallible, and they didn't know how to handle it. I kept my expression neutral, eating my oatmeal like nothing had changed. Inside, though, something sparked, a tiny flame of possibility. If Wyatt could fail, if their system could crack, maybe I wasn't as trapped as I thought. The swimming scholarship became an obsession. Dad made calls to coaches, trying to minimize damage. Mom researched appeal processes, second chances. Wyatt had to attend counseling, pass regular substance tests, prove he was still worth investing in. Their attention split between controlling me and salvaging him. In those cracks, I found space to breathe, to think, to plan. Not escape, not yet, but something. The girl who'd tried everything to expose Wyatt was still in there, just buried under exhaustion and defeat. She was waking up, and she was angry. 4 months pregnant, I started writing again. Not accusations or pleas for help, just observations. Times, dates, patterns, all in my head at first, memorized like multiplication tables, then in tiny print on toilet paper, hidden in that blind spot by the closet. My own evidence file, growing sheet by sheet. The family dinners became intelligence-gathering missions. I'd ask innocent questions about Wyatt's swimming, Dad's work schedule, Mom's volunteer commitments. They answered eagerly, pleased by my interest in family life, every detail stored away, building a map of their lives beyond this house. I discovered Wyatt's weakness during a particularly humid evening in May. He'd come home from practice complaining about chlorine burns, scratching at red patches on his shoulders. Mom fussed over him with aloe vera while I watched from the kitchen doorway. The pool chemicals had always bothered his skin, but lately it seemed worse. He'd started using prescription creams, keeping them in his bathroom cabinet. That information lodged itself in my brain alongside everything else I'd been collecting. 5 months pregnant now, my body heavy and unfamiliar. I moved through the house like a ghost gathering secrets. Mom had started letting me help with laundry, supervised of course, but it gave me access to pockets, receipts, ticket stubs, phone numbers scrawled on napkins. Wyatt's life outside these walls slowly took shape in my mind. The pregnancy made them careless in new ways. They saw my swollen ankles, my exhaustion, my need for frequent bathroom breaks, and mistook physical vulnerability for complete surrender. Mom started leaving me alone during her shower time, trusting the locked windows and her proximity to keep me contained. Dad stopped checking the baby monitor as obsessively, especially after his 3rd beer. I began testing boundaries in earnest. Small things first. Moving items in Wyatt's room when he was at practice, just enough to unsettle him. His lucky goggles would migrate from his dresser to his desk. His protein powder would shift shelves. He'd storm around accusing Mom of touching his things, while she'd insist she hadn't been in there. The arguments were small victories, cracks in their united front. My old dance teacher, Mrs. Rosenberg, lived 6 blocks away. I'd memorized her address years ago, back when I'd dreamed of private lessons. From my window, I could see the route I'd need to take. 6 blocks might as well have been 600 with the locks on the doors. But knowing she was there, so close, kept that flame of possibility burning. Wyatt's substance test failure had consequences beyond the obvious. His coach mandated weekly testing, and Wyatt had to provide samples at specific times, Thursdays at 4, without fail. It meant his Thursday practices ran late, and Dad had to pick him up instead of Mom. A 2-hour window where only Mom was home, and she had her own Thursday routine. Online grocery shopping from 4:30 to 5:30, headphones on, focused on her lists. I practiced moving silently through the house. Pregnancy had changed my center of gravity, but I learned to compensate. Avoiding creaky floorboards became second nature. I mapped which doors opened quietly, which windows had the loosest locks. Not to escape, not yet, but knowledge felt like power, and I was starving for any scrap of control. The adoption paperwork appeared one morning, left casually on the kitchen counter like it was nothing. Mom wanted me to see it, to understand the plan was moving forward with or without my cooperation. Private adoption, closed records, a couple from 3 states away. My signature required, of course, but they'd find a way around that. They always did. I stared at the papers while eating breakfast, memorizing the agency's name, the contact information, every detail that might matter later. Mom watched me read, waiting for a reaction. I gave her nothing, just finished my cereal and asked about the day's history lesson. Her disappointment was palpable. She'd wanted tears, resistance, something to punish. My compliance had become a weapon neither of us acknowledged. Wyatt's behavior grew more erratic as his swimming career hung in the balance. He'd always been arrogant, but now desperation edged his actions. He spent hours on the phone with coaches, his voice switching between cocky charm and barely contained panic. The golden boy was tarnishing, and he couldn't stand it. He started visiting my room at night again, not to touch, just to stand in the doorway, watching me pretend to sleep. Sometimes he'd whisper about the baby, about names, about how his child would be a swimmer too. I'd lie still, breathing evenly, while my skin crawled. The baby monitor recorded everything, but my parents never reviewed the footage anymore. Another crack in their system. That family photo scene hits different when Dad's literally polishing trophies, while his daughter holds evidence of her assault. Talk about priorities getting a good shine right there. 6 months pregnant, I felt the baby move for the first time. A flutter, then a definite kick. The sensation froze me mid-math problem, pencil hovering over the page. Mom noticed immediately, her eyes sharp with interest. She placed her hand on my stomach without asking, waiting. When the baby kicked again, she smiled. A real smile, the kind I remembered from before. For a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt, regret, but then Wyatt walked in, fresh from practice, and her expression hardened. She removed her hand, returning to the lesson as if nothing had happened, but I'd seen it. A crack in her armor, tiny but real. Dad's drinking escalated. Not falling down hammered, he was too controlled for that. But the beer count increased. His words got meaner, his patience thinner. He'd rant about the swimming scouts, about college costs, about how one stupid mistake could ruin everything. He meant Wyatt's substance test, but I felt the weight of his words differently. The house felt smaller every day. My world had shrunk to these rooms, these people, this situation. But within that shrinking world, I was learning. Every pattern, every weakness, every moment of vulnerability cataloged and stored. They'd trapped me, but they'd also given me nothing to do but study them. Wyatt failed another substance test. Not marijuana this time, but Adderall. He swore it was for studying, that everyone used it, that the testing was unfair. Dad's face went purple with rage. Mom cried actual tears. The scholarship was officially in jeopardy, pending a final review. Their retirement plan was crumbling, and they were scrambling to save it. The focus shifted entirely to Wyatt. Tutors appeared to boost his grades. Dad pulled strings to get him community service opportunities. Mom drove him to volunteer at the hospital, the food bank, anywhere that would look good to the review board. They needed him to appear reformed, dedicated, worthy of a second chance. Their obsession gave me breathing room. Mom started leaving me alone for longer stretches, trusting that pregnancy and locked doors would keep me contained. She'd rush off to drive Wyatt somewhere, leaving me with worksheets and warnings about staying put. But she stopped watching the baby monitor feed, stopped checking if I'd actually completed the assignments, stopped caring about anything but saving Wyatt's future. I used every unsupervised moment to prepare. The toilet paper notes grew into a detailed record. Times, dates, patterns, weaknesses. I practiced picking the simple locks on interior doors with bobby pins, a skill learned from YouTube videos back when I'd had internet access. The bathroom lock surrendered first, then the hall closet. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. 7 months pregnant, I overheard the most important conversation of my life. Mom and Dad thought I was napping, exhausted from the morning's lessons, but I'd positioned myself in the blind spot by the closet, ear pressed to the wall. Their bedroom shared that wall, and sound carried better than they knew. They were discussing the adoption again, but this time with new urgency. The couple from 3 states away had gotten cold feet. Too many questions about the father, about the circumstances. The agency suggested finding a different couple, but Mom had another idea. Her sister in Oregon, Alexandra, who'd been trying to conceive for years. Keep it in the family, Mom argued. Easier to control the narrative. Dad resisted at first. Alexandra had never liked him, had called him controlling even before all this, but Mom insisted. Family was family. Alexandra would take the baby, raise it as her own, and I'd have no claim. No DNA tests, no questions, no paper trail leading back to Wyatt. It was perfect, Mom said. Foolproof. I lay in my blind spot, hand on my stomach, feeling the baby kick. Alexandra, Aunt Ailey, I'd called her as a kid. She'd sent me birthday cards every year until my parents cut contact. Said she was a bad influence, too liberal, too nosy. Now I understood why. She'd seen through Dad's facade, had probably suspected something was wrong in our perfect family. The plan solidified over the next few days. Mom reached out to Alexandra, spinning a story about teenage mistakes and family honor. I watched her practice the conversation in the mirror, perfecting her concerned mother act. Dad grumbled but went along, focused on Wyatt's upcoming review board hearing. Wyatt sensed the shift too. He got cockier again, assured that his parents would fix everything like they always did. He'd lean close during dinner, whispering about how the baby would grow up calling him Uncle Wyatt, how he'd visit Oregon, be part of its life, how I'd never escape him. Not really, but he'd miscalculated. They all had, because Alexandra agreed to take the baby, but she also insisted on meeting me first. Alone, no parents, no supervision, just aunt and niece catching up. Mom tried to refuse, but Alexandra held firm. No meeting, no deal. She'd always been stubborn like that. The negotiation went on for days. Phone calls in hushed tones, Mom pacing the kitchen, Dad offering compromises. Finally, they agreed to a supervised visit. Alexandra would come to the house, spend an hour with me while Mom waited in the next room, close enough to intervene, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. I had one chance, 1 hour to communicate years of abuse, months of captivity, a lifetime of betrayal. The toilet paper notes wouldn't work. Mom would search me first. Speaking freely was impossible with Mom listening, but I'd learned to be creative under pressure. This family had taught me that. The morning of Alexandra's visit, I prepared carefully, chose my clothes with intention, did my hair the way she'd taught me years ago. French braids, she'd called them, though we both knew they were just regular braids with a fancy name, a signal maybe, a reminder of who we'd been to each other before my parents severed ties. Mom searched my pockets, checked my shoes, even looked in my mouth like I was smuggling contraband. She found nothing because there was nothing to find. Everything I needed was already in my head, organized and ready. Alexandra arrived at 2 o'clock sharp. She looked older, grayer, but her eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, seeing everything. She hugged Mom stiffly, then turned to me. Her face stayed neutral, but I caught the flash of horror at my appearance. 7 months pregnant at 15 had a way of shocking people. We sat in the living room, Mom hovering by the kitchen doorway, close enough to hear normal conversation, too far to catch whispers. Alexandra asked about school, about my interests, about the pregnancy. I answered carefully, each word chosen for Mom's benefit, but my hands told a different story, sign language. Alexandra had taught me the basics during a summer visit when I was 10, just for fun, she'd said. Our secret language, Mom never knew, had been too busy fawning over Wyatt's swim meets to notice. I'd practiced in my room these past months, muscle memory returning slowly. My hands moved casually as I spoke, looking like normal gestures to Mom, but Alexandra's eyes tracked every movement, her face carefully blank as she read my real message. Help, Wyatt, RP, parents no, trap, please. She didn't react, just kept asking bland questions about baby names and nursery colors, but her own hands started moving, subtle responses hidden in seemingly normal adjustments of her purse, her hair, her clothes. I understand, working on it, be ready. The hour passed too quickly. Alexandra stood to leave, hugging me goodbye. Her lips near my ear, she whispered 3 words too quiet for Mom to hear. Thursday, 4 o'clock, Thursday, Wyatt's substance test day, the 2-hour window. My heart hammered as I nodded, trying to look sad about her leaving. Mom walked her to the door, their voices a low murmur I couldn't make out. Then Alexandra was gone, and I was alone with my racing thoughts. Mom studied me carefully the rest of the day, looking for signs of rebellion. I gave her nothing, completing my lessons with robotic precision. At dinner, I asked polite questions about the adoption process, playing the resigned teenager accepting her fate. Dad looked pleased. Wyatt smirked. Mom relaxed incrementally, but Thursday was only 2 days away, and for the first time in months, I had hope. Wednesday crawled by with agonizing slowness. I maintained my routine, gave no sign that anything had changed, but inside, I was electric with possibility. Alexandra had understood. She was working on something. I just had to be ready. That night, I organized my toilet paper notes, condensing everything onto a single sheet. Names, dates, the most damning evidence. If I got only one chance to hand over proof, it had to count. I hid it in the one place they'd never check, inside my bra, folded small against my skin. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Mom complained about driving in the rain as she made breakfast. Dad left early for his shift. Wyatt ate quickly, anxious about his substance test. Everything normal, everything routine. I sat at the table, forcing down toast, trying not to watch the clock. 3:30 came too slowly and too fast. Wyatt grabbed his swim bag. Mom grabbed her keys. They discussed pickup times, dinner plans, normal family logistics. I stayed at the table working on a history essay about ancient Rome. Just another Thursday in my prison. 4 o'clock. The house settled into quiet. Mom retreated to her room with her laptop, headphones on, lost in grocery lists and meal planning. I waited 5 minutes, then 10, ears straining for any sound. At 4:15, I stood carefully, testing each floorboard. The bathroom first, my established routine. Mom wouldn't question that. But instead of using the toilet, I stood by the window, heart pounding. The lock had always been loose, wiggling in its frame. Mom's doing pocket checks like she's airport security while missing that her sister literally taught this kid sign language years ago. Sometimes the real escape plan was hiding in plain sight all along. I'd tested it dozens of times but never forced it. Now, I wrapped my hand in a towel and pushed. The lock held. I pushed harder, pregnancy weight behind it. Something creaked. Another push, desperation lending strength. The lock popped free with a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet house. I froze, listening. No footsteps, no call from Mom, just the distant tap of her fingers on her keyboard. The window slid open, rain immediately spattering my face. Freedom was an 8-foot drop to wet grass, doable maybe, if I was careful. If the baby, I couldn't think about that. Couldn't think about anything but the next few seconds. I squeezed through the window, belly scraping the frame, hung from my fingertips for a moment, then let go. The impact jarred through my legs, but I stayed upright. No pain, no cramping, just adrenaline and rain and the shocking reality of being outside. 6 blocks to Mrs. Rosenberg's house, but that wasn't the plan anymore. A car idled at the corner, hazard lights blinking, Alexandra behind the wheel, face tense with worry. I waddle ran toward her, rain soaking through my clothes. Behind me, still no sound from the house. Mom deep in her shopping, oblivious. I yanked open the passenger door, fell into the seat. Alexandra was already driving before I got it closed. We turned the corner, my prison disappearing from view. I was out, free. The impossibility of it made me dizzy. Alexandra drove in silence for several minutes, putting distance between us and the house. Finally, Finally, she pulled into a parking lot, turned to really look at me. Her face crumpled. She pulled me into a fierce hug, and I broke. Months of suppressed sobs poured out while she held me, murmuring reassurances. When I could breathe again, she pulled back, hands gentle on my shoulders. Her eyes were fierce with protective rage. She asked if I was hurt, if I needed a hospital. I shook my head, pulled out my folded evidence. She read it, face going pale, then furious. We had maybe 30 minutes before Mom noticed I was gone. Alexandra already had a plan. Not the police. She knew about Dad's connections. Not yet. First, we needed somewhere safe, somewhere they couldn't reach me. She'd rented a motel room 2 towns over, paid cash, fake name. We'd figure out next steps from there. The drive felt surreal. Strip malls and traffic lights, normal people living normal lives. I'd forgotten the world existed beyond those walls. Alexandra told me she'd suspected something was wrong for years. My parents cutting contact had only confirmed it. She'd hired a private investigator, found out about the homeschooling, the isolation. When Mom called about the adoption, she'd known it was her chance. The motel was cheap but clean. 2 beds, a kitchenette, a door that locked from the inside. I stood in the middle of the room, overwhelmed by the space, the freedom to move without surveillance. Alexandra ordered pizza, the first food I'd chosen for myself in months. While we ate, she explained the next steps. She had a lawyer friend who specialized in family law, someone Dad's connections couldn't reach. We'd file for emergency custody, get a restraining order. The pregnancy complicated things, but the evidence helped. Wyatt's DNA would prove everything. My phone had been gone for so long, I'd forgotten the comfort of connection. Alexandra let me use hers to check social media, see what had happened to my world. My friends had moved on, living their teenage lives. Natalie had a boyfriend now. My dance team had won regionals. Life had continued without me. Around 6, Alexandra's phone rang. Mom's number. We let it go to voicemail. Then Dad's number. Then unknown numbers that were probably Dad's top friends. Each unanswered call felt like a small rebellion. They'd lost control, and they knew it. The text started next. Threats disguised as concern. I was confused, mentally unstable, endangering the baby. They'd report Alexandra for kidnapping. Dad's friends were already looking. I needed to come home immediately for my own safety. The escalation was predictable, but seeing it in writing made it real. Alexandra documented everything. Screenshots, saved voicemails, a growing file of evidence. Her lawyer friend was already working on paperwork. By morning, we'd have legal protection. For the first time in months, I went to bed feeling safe, but safety was temporary. I woke to pounding on the door, Dad's voice demanding entry. The motel manager had sold us out, probably for less than it cost to fill his gas tank. Alexandra was already up, phone in hand, recording everything. She told Dad through the door that she was calling 911, not his friends, but actual emergency services. He'd have to explain why he was harassing a pregnant minor who'd fled abuse. The pounding stopped, whispered conversation outside, then footsteps retreating. We watched through the people as Dad and 2 uniformed officers got into their cars and left. They'd be back, but the threat of real scrutiny had worked. For now, we couldn't stay at the motel. Alexandra had a backup plan, because of course she did. A friend with a cabin an hour away, off the grid enough to buy us time. We packed quickly, checking out before dawn. The roads were empty, darkness hiding our escape. The cabin sat nestled in trees, small but secure. No neighbors, no easy access. Cell service was spotty, but that worked in our favor. Harder for them to track us. Alexandra's friend had stocked it with supplies, baby items included. They'd been planning this rescue for longer than I'd realized. That first full day of freedom felt endless. No schedule, no surveillance, no fear. I slept when tired, ate when hungry, walked outside whenever I wanted. My body, so used to confinement, didn't know how to process the space. I kept checking over my shoulder, expecting to see Wyatt's smirk or Mom's disappointed face. Alexandra's lawyer friend turned out to be Theo, a soft-spoken man with sharp eyes and a briefcase full of legal weapons. He took my statement with gentle professionalism, asking hard questions without judgment. The evidence was compelling, he said. The pregnancy was proof. Wyatt's DNA would seal it. But first, we needed to ensure my safety through legal channels. Emergency custody petition, restraining orders, medical documentation. The system Dad had used to trap me could also protect me, if we played it right. Theo had connections too. Judges who wouldn't be swayed by small-town police loyalty. The legal machinery moved faster than expected. Within 48 hours, we had temporary orders. My parents couldn't come within 500 feet. Alexandra had emergency custody. The court mandated medical care, including prenatal services. I was still trapped by circumstances, but the cage had gotten bigger. The first doctor's appointment revealed what I'd suspected. The baby was healthy, developing normally despite everything. 7.5 months along, due in 8 weeks. The ultrasound showed a girl, Wyatt's daughter, my daughter. The complexity of that truth sat heavy in the quiet room. Alexandra held my hand through every test, every question. The doctor was kind but thorough, documenting injuries I'd forgotten about. Bruises that had faded, scars that hadn't, evidence of trauma beyond the obvious. Each note in my file was another brick in the wall Theo was building around me. We established routines in our cabin refuge, morning walks, afternoon naps, evening calls with Theo. I started journaling properly, not on toilet paper but in a real notebook, pouring out months of suppressed thoughts, fears, plans. The words flowed like water from a broken dam. Mom tried reaching out through other relatives, painting herself as the concerned mother of a troubled teen. Most saw through it, but some wavered. Mental illness was easier to believe than the ugly truth. Alexandra fielded the calls with steel in her voice, protecting my peace. 2 weeks into freedom, Wyatt made his move. Not directly. He was too smart for that. But suddenly, social media filled with old photos. Him and me at swim meets, family vacations, birthday parties, captions about missing his best friend's sister, hoping I'd get the help I needed, playing victim to an audience who didn't know better. The comments ranged from supportive to suspicious. Some praised him for caring about his troubled sister. Others noted the timing, the performance of it all. A few brave souls asked pointed questions about the pregnancy, about why I'd really left. Those comments disappeared quickly, but not before Alexandra screenshotted them. Theo used Wyatt's public display against him, filed it as evidence of harassment, violation of the restraining order's spirit, if not its letter. The judge agreed. Wyatt was ordered to remove all posts referencing me, to cease any public discussion of the situation. His first legal loss, and it stung. The Swimming Scholarship Review Board made their decision. Wyatt was out. Too many failed tests. Too much controversy. His Olympic dreams evaporated overnight. Dad's retirement plan crumbled. Mom's golden boy was just another washed-up high school athlete. The family's sacrifice of me had been for nothing. The news reached us through Theo's contacts. I waited to feel vindicated, but mostly I felt empty. They'd destroyed so much for so little. Traded their daughter for a dream that dissolved at the first real test. The waste of it all made me tired. 3 weeks of freedom. The cabin felt less like hiding fighting and more like healing. I learned to cook simple meals, to trust my own choices. Alexandra taught me breathing exercises for labor, helped me prepare for what came next. The adoption question loomed, but she never pushed. My choice, she said. Always my choice. Then came the letter. Not from my parents, but from Natalie. Forwarded through Theo's office, her handwriting shaky with emotion. She'd figured it out, she wrote. The birthday visit, my disappearance, the pregnancy timeline. Mom shopping online while her daughter literally breaks out through a window? That timing feels awfully convenient. Like maybe she knew, but chose not to know. Watching someone physically escape after months of being trapped makes me wonder what finally made today different from all the other days she could have tried. She was sorry she hadn't seen it sooner. Sorry she'd believed their lies. Sorry for everything. I cried reading her words. My best friend, lost to their manipulation, finding her way back to truth. She wanted to help, to testify if needed. Her parents supported me too. The wall of silence my family built was cracking. Truth seeping through the gaps. More letters followed. Teachers who'd been suspicious but silenced. Neighbors who'd noticed the isolation. Coach Chen, devastated that she'd missed the signs. Each letter was validation. Proof that I hadn't imagined the wrongness of it all. People had seen, had wondered, had been deflected by my parents' careful performance. The custody hearing approached like a storm on the horizon. Theo prepared me carefully. What to wear, how to speak, which details mattered most. The judge would decide if Alexandra's emergency custody became permanent, if the restraining orders held, if I'd stay free or be forced back into their control. My parents hired expensive lawyers, played every card. I was mentally unstable, they claimed. The pregnancy had caused delusions. Alexandra had manipulated a vulnerable child. Dad's record was spotless. Mom's reputation sterling. Pillars of the community. Concerned parents facing a troubled teen's false accusations. But Theo had done his homework, found other girls who'd complained about Wyatt in middle school, complaints that disappeared after Dad's intervention, discovered Mom's prescription anxiety medication, the wine bottles hidden in the garage, uncovered the paper trail of control, isolation, manipulation. The hearing lasted 3 days. I testified via closed circuit, too pregnant to face them directly. Spoke my truth into a camera while a judge listened. Every detail, every violation, every failed escape attempt, the toilet paper notes submitted as evidence, the adoption papers with their forged signatures, the truth finally on record. Wyatt testified too, all wounded innocence and brotherly concern, but Theo's cross-examination was surgical. Why had he been in my room that night? Why did the pregnancy timeline match so precisely? Would he submit to a paternity test? His lawyers objected, but the damage was done. His smirk slipped, revealing the predator beneath. Mom broke on the stand, started strong with her prepared story, but crumbled under questions about the locked windows, the removed door, the baby monitor. Her hands shook like they had when giving me vitamins. Dad tried to steady her with looks, but she was beyond his control now. The truth spilled out in broken sentences, half admissions, redirected blame. Dad stayed solid, 20 years of testifying experience serving him well, but even he couldn't explain away the evidence. The calls to fellow officers, the intercepted reports, the systematic isolation, his professional network used to trap his daughter. The judge's face grew stonier with each revelation. On day 3, the judge ruled. Alexandra retained full custody. Restraining orders permanent. Criminal investigation recommended. My parents' faces went white as their lawyer whispered about potential charges. Wyatt slumped in his chair, finally understanding that consequences existed even for golden boys. We left through a side door, avoiding the small crowd of reporters Theo had strategically alerted. The story would break wide now, their reputation shattered beyond repair. Dad's career over, Mom's social standing destroyed, Wyatt's future evaporated. They'd sacrificed everything for him and lost it all anyway. Back at the cabin, I felt the baby drop lower, pressure increasing. 8 months pregnant, 2 weeks from due date. Free but still carrying my rapist's child. The complexity of victory mixed with impending birth, joy and terror in equal measure. Alexandra made tea while I processed the magnitude of what had just happened. That night, I made my decision about the baby. Not adoption, not to strangers, or even Alexandra. I would keep her, raise her, love her despite her origins. She was innocent in all this, deserving of a chance. My parents had taught me what not to do. I'd figure out the rest. The contractions started a week later, 2 in the morning, rain pattering against windows. Alexandra drove carefully to the hospital, the same calm efficiency she'd shown throughout this ordeal. I was admitted under my own name. No lies necessary anymore. The nurses were kind, the room private. Everything my parents would have denied me. Labor lasted 14 hours. Alexandra never left my side, coaching me through each wave of pain. I thought about Mom, wondered if she'd held my hand like this when I was born, before Wyatt, before the swimming, before choosing him over me. The sadness mixed with physical pain, tears for what should have been. She arrived at 4:47 p.m., screaming and perfect. 6 pounds, 3 ounces of possibility. The nurse placed her on my chest, and I felt a world shift. This tiny person, created from violence but born into love. I named her Hope because that's what she represented. Hope for healing, for a future beyond trauma. Alexandra cried when she held her grandniece for the first time, whispered promises of protection, of the family we'd build ourselves. The family I'd chosen, not the one I'd been born into. It wasn't traditional, but it was real. Theo visited the next day with paperwork. Birth certificate listing father as unknown. My choice to make when Hope was older. Custody documents ensuring my parents could never claim her. Protection orders extending to her tiny life. Legal armor against the people who should have been her grandparents. We stayed in the hospital for 2 days, learning to breastfeed, to swaddle, to exist as mother and daughter. No one questioned my age anymore. Teen motherhood was common enough, and my story was written in public record now. The nurses treated me with respect, not judgment. Small kindness that meant everything. The cabin welcomed us back with Alexandra's preparations. A bassinet by my bed, diapers stocked, tiny clothes washed and folded. She'd thought of everything while I'd been laboring, creating the nest my own mother should have built. Love in action, not just words. Those first weeks blurred together, feeding, changing, sleeping in fragments. Hope was an easy baby, as if understanding she needed to be. Alexandra took night shifts so I could rest, building strength for whatever came next. We developed rhythms, routines that felt nothing like the rigid schedule of captivity. Letters arrived from Natalie, from Mrs. Rosenberg, from others who'd learned the truth, support and love, offers of help, a community forming around us, filling the void my family had created. I wasn't alone anymore, had never been really, just isolated by those who should have protected me. The criminal investigation moved forward slowly. Wyatt was arrested, released on bail that drained my parents' savings. Dad's pension was frozen pending investigation. Mom sold her jewelry, then the house, trying to pay lawyers. Their empire crumbling crumbling as surely as mine had been built. I didn't follow the details closely, had no energy for their downfall beyond ensuring our safety. Hope needed me present, not lost in revenge fantasies. Every milestone she hit was a victory they'd tried to steal. First smile, first laugh, first time she gripped my finger with surprising strength. 3 months passed in our cabin sanctuary. Winter arrived early, snow blanketing our hidden refuge. I turned 16 quietly, Alexandra making a cake while Hope napped. No party, no friends, just us. But it felt like more than all the birthdays before combined. I was free to eat cake, to make wishes, to hope they'd come true. The trial date was set for spring. Theo warned it would be brutal, their lawyers fighting dirty. But the evidence was overwhelming now. Other victims had come forward, emboldened by my story. Wyatt's pattern revealed itself in hindsight. The golden boy had been tarnished long before that failed substance test. I focused on hope, on healing, on building the life they'd tried to steal. Started online classes to finish high school. Researched colleges that supported young mothers. Made plans that extended beyond mere survival. The future, once impossible to imagine, spread before us with possibility. Alexandra never asked how long we'd stay. The cabin was ours as long as needed. But I knew eventually we'd leave, find our own space in the world. For now, though, the trees and silence felt like medicine. Hope grew stronger. I grew stronger. We grew stronger together. Some nights I dreamed about them. Not nightmares anymore, just sad dreams of what might have been. A father who protected instead of controlled. A mother who chose her daughter over her son. A brother who saw a sister, not prey. But morning always came, and with it, Hope's hungry cries. Reality was better than dreams now. The investigation uncovered more than anyone expected. Dad's network of favors and cover-ups extended beyond just me. Other families silenced, other crimes buried. The system protecting its own until someone broke ranks. My escape had started an avalanche. Truth cascading down to bury their carefully constructed lies. Wyatt's other victims testified before the grand jury. Girls from swim team, from school, from parties where parents thought their daughters were safe. His pattern clear in retrospect. The golden boy who took what he wanted, protected by parents who refused to see. I wasn't special, just the one he had easiest access to. Mom sent one last letter through her lawyer. Not an apology, but an explanation. How she'd been raised to value sons over daughters. How Dad had convinced her I was troubled long before that night. How Wyatt was her chance to matter, to be more than just a cop's wife. How sorry she was that I couldn't understand. I burned it in Alexandra's fireplace, watching her excuses turn to ash. Understanding and forgiving were different things. Mom's letter trying to explain why she picked her son over her daughter gets the fire treatment it deserves. Some excuses are better off as smoke signals than saved messages. I understood now, but forgiveness would take longer, maybe forever. Hope deserved a mother who protected her own heart too. The trial began on a Tuesday in April. I testified via video again, Hope sleeping in my arms. Spoke my truth clearly, without shame. The defense tried their tactics, but I was different now, stronger. A mother who'd survived, not a child who could be silenced. My voice steady as I recounted every detail they'd tried to bury. The prosecutor's questions continued for another hour, methodical and thorough. I held Hope against my chest, feeling her tiny heartbeat as I described the locked windows, the removed door, the baby monitor that recorded my captivity. The defense attorney objected repeatedly, but the judge overruled most attempts. My evidence spoke louder than their protests. When my testimony ended, I closed the laptop and focused on Hope's needs. Alexandra had prepared bottles, knowing the stress might affect my milk supply. We settled into the cabin's quiet routine while the trial continued without us. Theo called each evening with updates, his voice carefully neutral as he described the proceedings. The prosecution's case built steadily. Other girls testified about Wyatt's behavior at swim meets, how he'd corner them in empty locker rooms. Their parents had complained to coaches, but Dad's influence had buried every report. One girl's mother broke down describing how her daughter had quit swimming entirely, too scared to be near the pool where Wyatt trained. Mrs. Rosenberg took the stand on day 4. She testified about my sudden withdrawal from dance, the way my parents had cut off all contact. She'd tried reaching out, worried about her star student's disappearance, but Mom had threatened harassment charges if she persisted. The dance teacher's testimony painted a picture of systematic isolation that even the defense couldn't dispute. Natalie's testimony hit hardest. She described our friendship, the birthday visit where I'd tried desperately to communicate. She'd found the index card later, tucked behind other books on the shelf. Wyatt must have missed a piece when he tore it up. She'd kept it, not understanding its significance until my disappearance made everything clear. The prosecutor entered the torn fragment into evidence, my handwriting spelling out "he hurt me" in shaky letters. The defense's case relied on character witnesses and doubt. Swim coaches praised Wyatt's dedication, carefully avoiding mention of complaints they'd ignored. Church friends testified about my parents' devotion, their concern for their troubled daughter. But cross-examination revealed gaps in their knowledge, assumptions based on carefully crafted lies. Dad's former partner testified for the defense, describing him as an exemplary officer. But under cross-examination, he admitted to fielding calls about me, passing reports directly to Dad instead of following protocol. His attempt to frame this as professional courtesy backfired when the prosecutor pointed out the violation of department policy. Week 2 brought forensic evidence. The prosecutor had subpoenaed medical records, piecing together a timeline of isolation. No doctor visits for over a year except the discreet house calls. No dental appointments. No vision checks. A teenager effectively erased from all systems that might have noticed abuse. The jury took notes as expert witnesses explained how unusual this pattern was. Wyatt's DNA test results were presented with clinical precision. The prosecutor didn't need to elaborate. The numbers spoke for themselves. Hope's parentage was undeniable. The timeline irrefutable. Wyatt's attorney tried to suggest consent, but the judge shut down that line quickly. The age difference and family relationship made consent impossible under state law. My parents' financial records revealed the depth of their commitment to protecting Wyatt. Private tutors paid in cash. Swimming coaches given generous bonuses. A college consultant hired to manage his image after the substance test failures. Every dollar spent on him while I'd been locked away, pregnant with his child. The adoption agency testified about the arrangement Mom had tried to make. Closed adoption, no questions asked, premium fees for discretion. The agency director seemed uncomfortable on the stand, admitting they'd had concerns about the circumstances, but the money had been persuasive. Their testimony added another layer to the pattern of cover-up. Alexandra testified on day 10, her voice steady as she described finding me at the cabin. She detailed my physical condition, malnourished despite pregnancy, bruises on my arms from restraint, the way I'd flinched at sudden movements. She documented everything with photos, each image projected for the jury to see. I stayed at the cabin during her testimony, unable to watch my trauma trauma displayed so clinically. The defense tried to paint Alexandra as a bitter relative who'd kidnapped a confused teenager, but her preparation showed. She had receipts for the private investigator, recordings of Mom's calls about the adoption, documentation of every step she'd taken to save me. Her testimony revealed months of planning, watching from afar as my situation deteriorated. Theo presented the custody case records next. The family court judge's ruling was read aloud, each finding of fact another nail in my parents' defense. The systematic isolation, the locks on windows, the removal of communication devices, all documented in legal proceedings they couldn't refute. The criminal trial jury heard how another judge had already found the evidence credible. Character witnesses for the prosecution included teachers who'd noticed changes in me before I disappeared from school. My English teacher brought her journal from that year, showing the entry I'd written about abuse. She'd been required to report it, had followed protocol, but somehow the report had vanished from official channels. Dad's interference was obvious, even if hard to prove directly. The swimming association representative testified about Wyatt's substance test failures and behavioral complaints. They'd kept him on the team despite multiple violations because of his talent and Dad's pressure. The representative seemed relieved to finally tell the truth, describing a pattern of special treatment that had enabled worse behaviors. Mom's sister from California flew in to testify. She described family gatherings where she'd noticed my isolation, Wyatt's inappropriate attention toward me. She'd tried talking to Mom, suggesting therapy for the family dynamics, but had been cut off completely. Her testimony revealed that multiple family members had sensed something wrong but been silenced. The prosecution's closing argument took 2 hours. The prosecutor walked through each piece of evidence methodically, building a picture of systematic abuse and cover-up. She emphasized the power dynamics: a cop father who controlled local systems, a mother who chose her son over her daughter, a brother who knew he was protected. The jury listened intently as she connected every dot. The defense's closing tried to create reasonable doubt. They painted me as a troubled teen who'd made up stories for attention, seduced her brother, then fled when faced with consequences. But their narrative had too many holes. Why the locks? Why the isolation? Why the documented injuries? Their attempt to victim blame fell flat against the mountain of evidence. The jury deliberated for 3 days. I spent them caring for hope, trying not to think about the 12 strangers deciding whether my truth would be validated. Alexandra kept us busy with walks in the woods, teaching me to identify winter birds, anything to pass the time. Theo promised to call the moment a verdict came in. The call came Thursday afternoon, guilty on all counts. I sat down hard, hope sleeping in my arms, as Theo listed the convictions: aggravated sexual assault, false imprisonment, child endangerment, conspiracy. The jury had believed me, had seen through my family's lies, justice through the system I thought would never protect me. Sentencing was set for the following month. Theo warned that Wyatt faced serious prison time, potentially decades. Dad's charges were still pending, but his career was over regardless. Mom faced her own criminal trial for conspiracy and child endangerment. The family that had sacrificed everything to protect Wyatt would be separated by prison walls. I didn't attend the sentencing. Theo reported back, 25 years for Wyatt, eligible for parole in 15. He'd cried as the judge read the sentence, finally understanding that consequences had caught up. Dad got 10 years for conspiracy and official misconduct. Mom received 5 years with possibility of probation after 2. Their perfect family scattered to different prisons. The house sold at auction to pay legal fees. Dad's pension went to victim restitution. Mom's jewelry and Wyatt's swimming trophies brought barely enough to cover their commissary accounts. Everything they'd built while keeping me prisoner turned to dust. The Golden Boy's medals tarnished in evidence lockers. Letters came from prison eventually. Dad's full of justification, blaming everyone but himself. Mom's dripping with self-pity, asking why I destroyed the family. Wyatt's the worst. Graphic threats about what he'd do when released. Alexandra filed them all as evidence for future restraining orders. Even behind bars, they couldn't stop trying to control me. But other letters came too. Girls Wyatt had hurt, thanking me for being brave enough to speak up. Parents who'd suspected but been silenced, apologizing for not pushing harder. Coach Chen offering free dance lessons when I was ready. A community of support building where my family had created only isolation. Hope grew stronger every day. At 6 months, she rolled over for the first time, laughing at her own accomplishment. The house selling at auction to pay legal fees is peak karma. Wyatt's swimming trophies basically became garage sale items, while Hope's out here rolling over and living her best baby life. 7 months brought crawling, her determination reminding me of my own. By 8 months, she pulled herself up on furniture, ready to walk toward whatever future we'd build together. I finished high school online, graduating with honors despite everything. College applications went out with essays about resilience and survival. Several schools offered full scholarships for young mothers, understanding that my circumstances hadn't defined my potential. Education became my path forward. The future my parents had tried to steal, slowly taking shape. Alexandra found us a small apartment near the State University. 2 bedrooms, ground floor, a tiny yard where Hope could play. We moved on her first birthday, marking new beginnings with chocolate cake and wobbly first steps. The cabin had been sanctuary, but it was time to rejoin the world. Therapy helped process the trauma. Individual sessions for me, eventually group therapy with other survivors. Learning that hypervigilance was normal, that trust would take time to rebuild. Hope attended daycare at the university while I took classes, both of us slowly learning to exist in spaces without locks. The criminal cases made local news, but I avoided reading coverage. Theo handled any necessary legal matters, shielding me from ongoing proceedings. Appeals were filed and denied. Prison sentences began. The system that had failed me initially finally worked, grinding slowly but inevitably toward justice. 2 years passed. Hope learned to talk, calling Alexandra Gamma and me Mama with equal delight. I majored in social work, determined to help other trapped children. Internships at family crisis centers showed me how many stories echoed mine. The system needed people who understood from inside. Wyatt's first parole hearing was denied. He'd been disciplined multiple times for harassment, sending letters to other inmates about me. His lack of remorse was noted in the official record. Another decade before he could try again. Dad lost his first appeal. Mom served her minimum sentence but struggled to find housing with her record. I graduated summa fluid laude, Hope toddling across the stage during the ceremony. Job offers came from multiple agencies, all wanting someone who understood family trauma intimately. I chose a position with the state's Child Protective Services, full circle from the system that had failed me. The work was hard but meaningful. Home visits where I recognized the signs others might miss. Court testimony where my experience gave weight to observations. Saving children from what I'd endured, one case at a time. Hope grew up understanding that some families hurt instead of protect, but love could be chosen and created. 5 years after escape, I bought a small house with a good school district. Hope started kindergarten, bright and confident despite her origins. Alexandra lived nearby, still our fiercest protector. We'd built the family my parents had destroyed. Chosen, supportive, real. Mom wrote one final letter after her release. She was living in a halfway house, working minimum wage, alone. She wanted to meet Hope, claimed grandmother's rights. Theo shut it down quickly. Her parental rights had been terminated with her conviction. She had no claim on the granddaughter she tried to sell. Hope asked about her father when she turned 7. I told her age-appropriate truth. He was someone who'd hurt me, who couldn't be part of our lives. She accepted it with the wisdom children sometimes show, more interested in her upcoming dance recital. Mrs. Rosenberg had kept her promise, teaching Hope the joy of movement I'd almost lost. The anniversaries got easier. Each October marked another year of freedom, of choices, of life beyond locked windows. Hope's birthdays celebrated not just her existence but our survival. We'd both been born from trauma into something better. My work expanded to policy advocacy, testifying before state committees about mandatory reporting failures, training police departments about family violence dynamics, writing procedures that might catch what everyone missed with me. Systemic change, one policy at a time. Hope thrived despite everything. Honor roll, dance team, a circle of friends whose parents knew our history but judged us by our present. She grew up fierce and protected, understanding that strength came from surviving and choosing to help others do the same. 10 years out, I earned my master's degree in clinical social work, opened a private practice specializing in trauma recovery, supervised interns who reminded me of myself, survivors determined to transform pain into purpose, the cycle of healing expanding outward. Wyatt died in prison during his 11th year, a fight with another inmate, details unclear. I felt nothing when Theo called with the news. Hope was at soccer practice, Alexandra making dinner, life continuing without pause for the man who'd tried to destroy us. His death changed nothing. We'd already built our lives without him. Dad served 8 years before a heart attack held him in the prison yard. Mom attended his funeral alone, their old friends having long abandoned them. She sent one last letter afterward, finally attempting an apology. Too little, too late. I filed it unopened with all the others. At 15, Hope was nothing like I'd been, confident where I'd been desperate, protected where I'd been trapped, loved where I'd been betrayed. She knew her story's beginning, but focused on writing her own chapters. College prep classes, volunteer work at the crisis center, plans for law school. Justice in her blood, but not defining her. Alexandra aged gracefully, her fierce protection mellowing into proud support. She walked me down the aisle when I married Theo's law partner, a gentle man who understood survival. Hope as my maid of honor, our chosen family filling the seats. No blood relatives needed. 20 years from that October escape, I stood before a conference of social workers. Keynote speaker on recognizing family violence. PowerPoint slides clinical and detached, but my voice carried the weight of lived experience. In the audience, Hope watched her mother transform trauma into teaching. Full circle from the girl who'd tapped SOS at family dinners. The speech ended with statistics about survival rates, intervention strategies, hope for change. But I thought about that 15-year-old girl, pregnant and defeated, who'd found strength in her blind spot by the closet, who'd written evidence on toilet paper and learned sign language to save herself, who'd jumped from a bathroom window into rain and freedom. My story became teaching tool, case study, proof that survival was possible. But mostly it was just mine. A girl who'd refused to be silenced, who'd built a life from ashes, who'd chosen love over legacy. Hope shifted in her seat, checking her phone, typical teenager impatient with her mother's work. The greatest victory of all, her ordinary life, unburdened by my extraordinary story. The conference ended with usual networking, business cards exchanged, promises to collaborate. Hope drove us home, newly licensed and careful with her precious cargo. Alexandra waited with dinner, our weekly tradition unbroken. 3 generations of chosen family, proof that love could be built rather than inherited. That night, I tucked away the conference materials and helped Hope with calculus homework. Normal life, hard won and deeply cherished. The locks on our doors opened from inside, the windows clear and unbarred. Freedom so ordinary we barely noticed it anymore. The greatest triumph of all, a life where trauma was history, not destiny. Thanks for letting me poke at all those interesting details with you today. Definitely gave me a lot to think about. Until we bump into each other again somewhere, like the video. It helps more than you think.